but we're always talking about food as the foundation for health. And why is it so important? And it's because of the microbiome in your pet. Do you have a dog that keeps getting allergies? They're going in and out of the vet clinic. They're always itchy, then they get better. Or maybe you have a dog that gets diarrhea all the time. They have a really sensitive GI tract. You go in, you get the metronidazole, your dog's diarrhea goes away, the stool firms back up, and then 2 weeks later, literally the diarrhea comes back. Or maybe you have a cat that vomits after eating its food or eats so quickly and all of a sudden it starts vomiting again. If that sounds like you, your pet's microbiome is off. And that's what we're talking about today. I'm Dr. Katie Woodley, the natural pet doctor, and this is our weekly coffee talk with the doc. Today, I am so excited. I get goosebumps thinking about this topic because I love nutrition, but we're always talking about food as the foundation for health. And why is it so important? And it's because of the microbiome in your pet. If we're not feeding the microbiome the right foods, utilizing the right supplements, and helping our pet's overall immune system, you're going to be in the vet clinic over and over and over again. That's just an unfortunate fact. But I'm here to let you know that we can help you. We can help your pet. We can help your pet achieve optimal health so you don't have to keep going back and forth to the vet clinic, spending all that money. Give me an amen on a Saturday if you are with me with that. If you've been doing the metronidazole dance for your pets that have diarrhea, that sucks. That's so frustrating. You go in, they get better, they're on the drugs for 7 to 10 days. Maybe they're taking some probiotics at the same time. 2 weeks later, you're like, what is happening? They're getting diarrhea again. And the reason why is that microbiome has been wiped out. Those good bacteria are gone. So let's talk about exactly what is a microbiome. And ask your questions. You're here live with us. Thank you for being here. Make sure you pop those questions in. As I always do, I'll kind of interject those questions with our talk today also. So what exactly is a microbiome, right? It doesn't necessarily mean it's just the GI tract, but when we're thinking about microbiome, it's the trillions of bacteria, the cells, the genetic material of those bacteria that typically when we talk today are within that gut lining of our pets. So that's from the oral cavity all the way to the rectum. So from here all the way out, that's what we're talking about, are those billions and trillions of different types of bacteria. And what's really, really neat is that this system plays a huge part of our pet's overall health, our overall health. And there are so many studies that are coming out that people are starting to realize that, hey, we actually need to listen up, because if we're not treating the microbiome right, it's actually going to lead to diseases like cancer, allergies, overweight. If your pet's obese, if your pet is overweight and you're having trouble getting them to lose weight, and you're like, I can't feed them any less, they're starving, it could be your pet's microbiome is off, which is really cool because we can change it. If your pet is always getting itchy allergies, and we've tried everything, I know I have a couple of people on here, I know you understand, and we are going through the works with your pets with these chronic allergies, there may be another way. Along with the herbs, along with food, which we're going to talk about, can manipulate that microbiome and the good bacteria and what's going on in that gut. So, but there's another way we can look at to put the good bacteria back in, rebalance, feed the foods that actually optimize your pet's health and can change those different types of bacteria that are present. So this is what we're talking about. So excited. Oh my goodness. Okay, so what do these bacteria do, right? We think of bacteria and we're like, bacteria is bad, right? No, actually, it's not necessarily bad. So we have good bacteria, yes, we have bad bacteria. So when we think about diarrhea, like one of the strains that's really bad, Clostridium, when it's in an overgrowth phase. When we have too much Clostridium, we can get diarrhea. It can be really significant. It can be really bad for our pets, for people. If you have a Clostridium overgrowth, it can make you really, really sick. So we do want to focus on the good bacteria, but we have to keep in mind these other bacterial strains and what happens if they are in a higher population than some of these good bacteria like Lactobacillus, Bifidobacterium. Those are some of the common ones that I'm sure a lot of people here have heard about. And what these bacteria do in the microbiome, in that GI tract, is that they actually help break down the food. They help digest nutrients. They're going to synthesize vitamins. They prevent infection. They actually support the immune system health. And so when it's off, we see everything kind of go awry in the body. And that's when we get those infections that keep coming back, the itchiness, inflammation. We can see cancer formation. We can see bad dental health. Like, how crazy is that? We can actually affect the microbiome in our pet's oral cavity, their mouth, to reduce plaque and tartar. And certain foods will either help that or inhibit it. And this microbiome influences every tissue in the body, every tissue. So a lot of times when we look at pets from a conventional medicine standpoint, we tend to forget that everything's connected. And we can't forget that. Like, we treat symptoms. So like metronidazole, your pet has diarrhea. We put them on metronidazole. We're treating diarrhea. But why did that happen? We kind of forget that everything else is connected. And then sometimes what happens is they're on this drug and we see other symptoms flare up weeks or maybe a month or two later. And we're like, oh, it's a new symptom. It's a new symptom, yes, but it could have actually stemmed from that root cause that we didn't address in the first place. So we need to remember that everything is connected, so we can use the right foods to help heal the underlying problem, heal that gut lining, heal that dysbiosis. So when the microbiome is off, and then a lot of times we can reduce those signs of infection, inflammation, allergies, all those other things. And so going back to it, they're finding there's numerous studies that are showing that because the microbiome affects every tissue in the body, when it's off, we see obesity, we see heart disease, we see allergies. Different bacterial levels can lead to kidney disease in your dogs and your cats. And we can manipulate those through diet, prebiotics, probiotics, supplements. We can affect it with antibiotics, fermented foods, raw foods. There's studies that showcase autism, schizophrenia. And I see this almost every day. When a pet's microbiome is off, their gut health is off, we see anxiety, increased levels of stress, separation anxiety is worse. Maybe that's you. Maybe you're like, oh my God, is that why my dog gets loose stool when I'm stressed? Yes, it is. We are connected with our pets. And when we get stressed, they get stressed, their microbiome changes. And we share microbiomes too, which is really interesting. Dogs share microbiomes too. Who here has a pet who eats stool? Coprophagia. They eat poop. They're eating either theirs or their friends' stool, and they're changing their microbiome by doing that too. So it's not necessarily, it's disgusting, especially when they come and they lick you in the face afterwards. But there's fecal transplant therapy. There's all sorts of things that are happening that your pet is doing to affect its microbiome. And so I mentioned a little bit, how do we influence it? And that's where, yes, dog podcast network, cat poop all the time. I think it's just like a tasty snack. Like our shepherd used to do that, and it's so disgusting. However, we have to think about it. Like our dogs and our cats, they have similar microbiomes, but they're actually very different. And so they're influencing their microbiome when they're eating poop. Poop is like waste materials and bacteria. That's what poop is. And so we're going to talk a little bit about this later, and we're going to talk more about this in our monthly webinar. So if you're not registered, make sure you register, because we're going way deep. Like, this is a brief summary of what we're going to talk about in our end of the month webinar, all about microbiome, what you can do, checklists, supplements. Here you go. This is how you fix it. So make sure you register. But it's very interesting how we can use diet. We can change protein amounts. We can change carbohydrate contents of food to affect different bacterial strains to either reduce them or increase them based on what we're trying to accomplish for your pet's health. And then probiotics. This is a common thing. We're going to talk a little bit more about this in just a minute, but this is where most people go first, putting those good bacteria back in. And there's some benefits and limitations, and there's some really cool studies I'm going to mention in a few minutes. And then we have antibiotics. Antibiotics are, a lot of people are like, I don't want to use antibiotics. We need to use them at times. I would say if your dog has diarrhea, your cat has diarrhea, get them checked out. They need to have the tests done. We need to look for bacterial infections, giardia, overgrowths of different things that are maybe leading to that diarrhea before we put them on metronidazole. Metronidazole comes with all sorts of side effects. If you follow Dr. Karen Becker or Rodney Habib with Paw Planet, if not, you need to follow them today, because they just did a live about metronidazole and the effects on the microbiome with that drug. And then they also talked about all sorts of other side effects that come with it. It's one of the few antibiotics that cross the blood-brain barrier. So that can help us treat infections that are in the nervous system, potentially in the brain. However, it can also lead to numerous side effects down the road. And a lot of pets have actually experienced side effects. But one of the biggest things, and the things that relates to this talk today, is that when we give metronidazole, yes, it works amazing at firming up the stool. Who here can agree with that? I'm pretty sure almost every single pet, especially if they're older, has been on metronidazole at some stage in their life. And it works really well for firming up the stool. But what happens, and I see this almost every single day, and especially through the last 10 years of practice, and especially when I used it a lot before I got into herbal medicine and using food as therapy, is that pet comes back 2 weeks later. Like, it worked great, doc, thank you. Like, but now it's back. Like, what are we doing? Oh, here, take some more metronidazole. It worked the first time. It should work this time. And let's add some probiotics in. Oh, we'll put them on, a bland diet. So those prescription foods, and let's see how they do, right? The thing is that studies are showcasing that we are completely wiping out the good bacteria. So antibiotics are good. They're necessary when needed. We've done the tests. We've done the diagnostic tests to make sure that our pet truly needs it. So it's very important to spend that little bit of extra money, or else we're going to be in this repeat cycle of you going back to the vet clinic for the same problem, because now we created a new one. We actually took out the rest of the good bacteria that may have been like hanging on by a thread, because antibiotics aren't strain specific. They will kill everything. And studies are showcasing that. We can take a stool sample and analyze it and see what bacteria strains are left over. And we have higher pathogenic, so bad bacteria, left in the GI tract. So not ideal. So antibiotics definitely play a huge part. Leaky gut, dysbiosis, affecting that entire microbiome and upsetting that balance between the good bacteria and the bad bacteria. We can also use things like prebiotics. So not probiotics, but prebiotics. And these are typically foods. So we have like soluble carbs, insoluble carbs, fiber, raw vegetables. So we can use foods that help feed the microbiome, give them energy, give them nutrients to help sustain and digest the food appropriately, and also feed that good bacteria so that they're happy and surviving. And then the really cool thing that we have as an option to change the microbiome is fecal microbiome transplant therapy. Yes, we're feeding poop to your dog or your cat. But this is really cool. And there's some really neat companies that are doing some amazing things where they're checking the stool. They're seeing where your pet's microbiome is off, and they're taking those results and they're creating a supplement. It's poop, but it's poop formulated for your pet to replace and put back in the bacteria they should have that's missing from their gut lining. And this is so much more powerful than a probiotic because it's like a healthy microbiome being transplanted into your pet. So it's really cool. And then you can test it again after the therapy and see how well it worked. And there's a lot of really positive results that are coming from this. And it's becoming more popular, more available, which is great. And people, they tend to use it for Clostridium overgrowths, so C. difficile infections that are very severe. However, they're not using it until like the patient has failed treatment 3 times and we've completely wiped out their entire microbiome again with really strong, heavy medications. I know this because years ago I went through this with my husband and they refused to approve microbiome fecal transplant therapy. And there are so many positive results. So the fact that we can start integrating this into our pets to achieve optimal health, we need to be asking for this from our veterinarians. The more we ask for it, the more the vet, even if they're not familiar with it, if they're conventional and they're like, I have no idea what this is, they'll go and research it and we'll start offering it. And guess what happens? Our pets become healthier, happier, and live longer. And you have less visits to the vet clinic that cost a ton of money for the same problem. So start asking your vet for these tests, even if you're not sure what they are. So Animal Biome is the company. Go and take a look at them. They're fantastic. So what exactly, let's talk about diet a little bit. How does diet influence the microbiome? And there's a lot of studies, and then there's a lot of vague studies. I was going through some of them, and then I look at who's funding the study, and I'm like, oh, that makes sense. Like they said, dry food is better. You know, when we have the bigger companies funding certain studies, you have to take what they say with a grain of salt. So always look when you're searching on like PubMed, Google Scholar. Those are great resources to look up studies. When you type in like dog microbiome and diet, and then scroll all the way down, who funded this study. I found a great resource, and I was like, but it was kind of a little bit off. And I looked at who funded it and I was like, oh, well, Hill's Nutrition. Of course, they don't want us feeding raw diets. That makes sense. So it's going to be a little bit biased, but there's still some good information in there that we can take. So keep that in mind when you as a pet parent are looking at studies, who's funding it, what could be some of the motivation for what they're saying, their conclusions from those studies, because sometimes you'll see kind of opposite opinions. You'll see, oh, well, that's great. And then the next line, you're like, what? That doesn't make sense. So keep that in mind when you're being an empowered pet parent and you're looking at these studies. So food is the substrate for the GI microbiome. It is going to directly affect what those bacterial levels are doing. And also, there's going to be they found significant differences in the bacteria population in the oral cavity, in the mouth, in the GI tract. So differences between small intestine, stomach, and the colon, because they're doing different things in the body too. So we need different types of bacteria that are fermenting foods, that they're producing short chain fatty acids, that they're doing all different things. They're helping to digest depending on what's going on in that system. So that makes sense. And so the small intestine in our dogs and cats is going to be more sensitive to dietary changes. And a lot of times that's where we focus our support on. And with cats and dogs, they're different. They're not the same. Cats are not small dogs. Cats are more carnivorous. They need protein in their diet. They don't need carbs. Proteins and fats are what they need to eat. Dogs tend to be more omnivorous. They can do well with proteins and fats, but they're more capable of digesting a higher amount of carbohydrates. So when I talk about, and you watch, go to our blog post, go to our YouTube channel, The Natural Pet Doctor, if you watch any of the previous videos we've done, we talk a lot about adding vegetables into the diet. We talk about low carb diets, potentially getting off the kibble if you can. Kibble is a high carbohydrate diet. Even if it says higher protein, it will still always be a higher carbohydrate content. Your grain-frees tend to be higher carbs because now we're using pea, which is a high carb, to replace those grains. And when we talk about adding real foods, real vegetables, those are your carbohydrate content. We're using those for phytonutrients, to add in those antioxidants, to naturally reduce inflammation and support the immune system. And so those tend to be the carbohydrate source that we're talking about when we look at, okay, how is diet affecting the microbiome? And because dogs and cats are different, cats need those higher proteins. They're going to have a different microbiome system than dogs will. And that's because you need different bacteria. You need different things in that GI tract to break down the proteins, to break down the carbs, to break down the fats. They're digested very differently. Now, the digestibility of the food is what determines the extent of how well those nutrients are broken down and absorbed by the pet. And this is something that's missed when we're feeding kibble diets, processed diets. What is that digestibility of that food? So how well is it being broken down by the body and being utilized? Because what happens is when we feed a low digestible food, so typically our processed foods, kibble diets, dry food diets, they're going to be less digestible. They're not broken down before they reach the good bacteria or the bad bacteria. And what happens is that's affecting the microbiome. So now rather than all the proteins and things being broken down, and then there's some fiber and stuff to work on the microbiome, now that microbiome is like, oh my gosh, what is happening? And it completely changes the levels. So we'll see a switch between these different strains. The lactobacillus might go down, some of the other ones go up. And then we see over the long term, we see chronic disease, we see inflammation, we see infection, we see things like cancer, we see things like allergies. Diet's not going to cause an issue short term, usually. What happens is that we think that we're feeding like the right food, and we're like, they've been on this food for 2 years. They've been fine. And what happens? Bam! They get allergies, and you're like, they've been on the same food. Why is that causing a problem? That's why. That food has been creating a leaky gut, has been creating a dysbiosis this amount of time and changing those bacterial levels. That's why that happens. So the food you're feeding today can significantly adversely affect your pet's health in 2 to 3 years' time. Food is the long-term treatment plan. It is the foundation that we need to be looking at on how this is going to affect and ultimately, hopefully, improve and optimize your pet's health. So some of the interesting things, let's talk some specifics. There's actually a study. So let's talk about raw food diets, right? I never recommend transitioning straight from like kibble to raw, because that pet's microbiome is used to being on a kibble diet. So that microbiome has adjusted to that high carb diet. So we need to gradually change it. And there's supplements and different things that we do to transition to that. We're going to talk about that in our monthly webinar. Make sure you register. Go to thenaturalpetdoctor.com and you'll see a big pop-up and just register. And you'll learn about that. You're going to have a checklist. How do I transition? What do I need to do to get this pet over to this? What are those top supplements? How do you know the microbiome's off? We're going to cover that in our monthly webinar. But let's talk about raw diets, raw meaty bone diets, because it's such a taboo topic in pet health. What they found in studies when they compared dogs and cats that were fed a raw meaty bone diet compared to dogs that were fed a kibble diet is they actually had a more diverse microbiome than dogs and cats fed kibble diets. I'm not surprised, because that is more a biologically appropriate, highly digestible diet for dogs and cats. They have shorter digestive tracts, they have lower stomach pH, they can break down things much better than us. So there's not a long transit time for them to be exposed to things like salmonella, E. coli, all of those problems that we get worried about. And so, yes, they can. You need to handle the meat appropriately. All those things, we can get those. So you need to be careful if you are doing that. But if we can transition our pets to these diets, we're actually going to help feed their microbiome a lot better. With pets with inflammatory bowel disease, chronic, what we call enteropathies, inflammation in the GI tract, we've actually found in studies that they have decreased microbial diversity. So they don't have as many good bacterial strains. And what's really important is there's a decrease in the amount of strains that actually produce small chain fatty acids in the gut. And what we find is there's higher amounts of E. coli. And a lot of these pets are on kibble diets, not super digestible. So remember, a lot of that is passing through to the lower gut and affecting that microbiome. And so with inflammatory bowel disease, we truly, like, this is the most severe leaky gut, most severe leaky gut form. We need to be focusing on how do we reduce inflammation? What are the best foods? A lot of times what we'll do is we'll actually do a food trial, limited proteins, and lots of probiotics, digestive enzymes to help heal that GI tract lining. And then if that's not working, a lot of people will move to hydrolyzed protein diets. But a lot of these pets can do well with a home cooked diet that's already more easily digestible. But some will do really well with a hydrolyzed diet. So it just depends on your pet, and it can sometimes be a trial and error. However, the goal is to always prevent this from happening. And that's by looking at the foods we're feeding now and what's going on in your pet's microbiome and checking that and testing that. With allergies, so the microbiome has these pro-inflammatory and anti-inflammatory properties. It's doing amazing things. It's helping to boost the immune system or destroy the immune system, depending on what we're feeding it and what the good bacteria and the bad bacteria proportions are in the GI tract. And with allergies, they've actually shown, there's a validated model that they did for atopic dermatitis. So if you have a pet with environmental allergies, chewing the feet, scratching, ear infections, having issues with that, they've actually found with atopic dermatitis, so atopy, we're just going to call it allergies to keep it simple, they found that early exposure to probiotics, specifically with the lactobacillus strain present, it reduced the allergen-specific IgE when that pet was exposed to these probiotics for the first 6 months of their life. So it decreased the allergy response, reducing the chance that your pet gets allergies. That's essentially what that means. By giving it a good probiotic for the first 6 months of life. And we're going to talk about what to look for in a probiotic briefly. And the cool thing is with this is they did a follow-up study, and those effects persisted for 3 more years after that pet came off of the probiotic. How powerful is that? So when your pet is born, your little puppy and kitten, they're precious little things, they have nothing in their gut, sterile. There's nothing there. That's why colostrum is so important for those puppies and kittens. The immunoglobulins, IgG, those are what's in the first few hours of milk from the mother that puppy kitten is suckling on. That is populating the gut bacteria. So that mother's health will directly affect her puppy's health and set them up for either a lifetime of health or a lifetime of perpetual health problems. And there's actually studies that have showed that dogs and cats that were fed a kibble diet while pregnant set up an increased risk for those puppies and kittens to develop allergies later on in life. And you know why? It's because their microbiome is off. So that's where we can use food to support the overall microbiome health. So what can you do? Okay, great, Katie. Those are awesome studies. What can we do, right? Okay, so here's a few little simple tricks. And remember, we're gonna go really deep in this in our hour webinar this month. So make sure you register. And hound that home, because this is the key to your pets having a lifetime of health. I can't downplay that enough. Your microbiome of your pet is connected to every single tissue in your pet's body. When it is not operating well, your pet's not going to operate well. When we feed it crap, your pet's health is going to be crap. Like, that's just a fact. I hate to be that blunt and abrasive. However, it's the truth. And so what can you do? Starting from right now today, I already want you to learn how to read food labels. So go to our blog posts, all the food blog posts, check them out, watch those short video clips. You need to know how to read pet food labels, because you need to know if those ingredients are causing inflammation in your pet's body. That is number one. That is essential. That will help your pet, hands down, empowering yourself to know what's in your pet's food. There are some good brands of kibble out there. We've talked a lot about those in previous coffee talks and on our blog posts, so check them out. But you need to know what's in that pet food. We need to look at raw, fresh foods. These are a great source of natural microbes for your pet. So when you add these in, adding in those vegetables, adding in those leafy greens, adding in romaine lettuce, adding in your carrots, those are going to be a source of microbes that feed the gut health. So start adding those in, add them in as a treat, add them into the meal 3 times a week if you are feeding kibble. So we need to look at those raw, fresh foods. And then what we need to look at is fermented foods. What are natural sources of foods that are high in microbes? So Answers Pet Food. Who here's heard of Answers Pet Food? You can do like a heart, thumbs up, like just let me know you've heard of them. They're doing amazing things, and they haven't been out for a really long time, and I just love what they're doing. But they have fermented broth. Broth is amazing at healing the gut lining. We have L-glutamine, we have collagen. There are a lot of things that help heal that GI lining to support your pet's overall immune health. Because when we have leaky gut, we have that separation of the tight junctions. It should be nice and tight, but that separation allows bacteria, toxin, food to pass through into your pet's bloodstream, and then we get allergies, we get inflammation, we get so many problems. And yes, Sean, I love that you use they have a fermented fish stock, they have goat's milk, goat cheese treats. Don't use cow's milk. Stop using cow's milk. Our pets are lactose intolerant, but goat's milk is very different from cow's milk. And we can use that to support our pet's microbiome. So start adding those fermented foods in. There's also, I'm forgetting the brand, but kefir that we can use too. Open farm kefir is another option that we have where we can add small amounts. Now remember, these are concentrated with a lot of bacteria, good bacteria, but too much of anything can lead to bad things happening. So if you've ever had kombucha and you're like, this tastes so good, I'm gonna drink the whole bottle, I've never had this before, get ready, because you need to be close to a bathroom. Like, putting too much of a good thing into your gut can lead to diarrhea, GI upset. Doesn't mean that it's bad, it's just that you did too much. You did an overdose of it, essentially. So keep that in mind. You wanna do small amounts throughout the week to support GI health, reduce inflammation, support those good bacteria. We want them to be happy. Happy gut health means a happy pet. And then we're a happy pet parent because we're not going to the vet all the time, right? We're spending less. So the other thing too is when we think about probiotics, let's talk about probiotics. Okay, welcome to the supplement industry. It is unregulated, and lots of supplements we think are fantastic. You look at them, you're like, this is great. They suck. They don't actually have what's in there in them. When they're actually tested at an independent facility, they don't have anything in them. So I was reading an article actually this morning about supplements, and it was an independent analysis of, I think it was 40 different supplements. And what I'll do, I'll go back and I'll find this and I'll post it under this so you guys can take a look at this because it's eye-opening. And they analyzed how many of these bacterial strains are in here, because usually I look at 10 billion CFUs, colony forming units. That's what I want to see. I want to see a wide spectrum of bacterial strains, because we want broad spectrum. We want to put as many good different strains back into the pet's body. However, this study showcased that a lot of these companies that we look at and we're like, oh, that looks great, we're feeding the pet's body, have nothing in it. That's just a fact. They're just not, there's no good bacteria in it. You're just giving a powder, you're giving a capsule, and they're just pooping out whatever was in it. And so some of the good brands that I go back to time and time again would be Proviable, RX Vitamins, RX Biotic, and then Fortiflora is a good brand. The downside I have with Fortiflora is that if your pet has a potential food sensitivity, it has an animal digest in it. So if your pet's sensitive to beef, chicken, they may react to it. So it's not hypoallergenic. However, it also only has one strain. So it's still good, and it still helps a lot of pets, and studies have shown it helps cats with upper respiratory infections. So you can use it. It's not a problem. But those three, I would say, are going to be your top ones. And once again, I'll post that study so you can take a look and go, wow, that's crazy. Maybe your pet's on one of those and there's nothing in it. So we're throwing away money. I don't want you to throw away money. That's not the purpose of helping our pets and just buying the things thinking we're helping them. The other thing with probiotics is a lot of times we can't use probiotics to completely change the microbiome. The reason why, when we think about it, so even if there's 10 billion colony forming units in this probiotic, a lot of it doesn't stay in the GI tract. Yes, it's pretty powerful based on that allergy study I cited, where giving probiotics for the first 6 months of your pet's life can dramatically set them up to reduce allergies over a very long time, for years. But if we have severe leaky gut, your pet has inflammatory bowel disease, we can't just rely on probiotics to fix it. And I see that a lot in Facebook groups. Like, people are like, oh my gosh, my pet has this, what should I do? And they're like, feed probiotics. I'm like, that's one little thing. Doesn't hurt to start doing it, but we have to keep in mind the limitations. There's trillions of bacteria in your pet's gut. And so by using a little supplement, it's going to help. But we need to use a multimodal approach. So we need to combine what's the best food for your pet. Is it a high fiber diet? Is it low protein? Not usually. I never typically recommend low protein unless your pet is in end stage kidney failure. Then we use more biologically available proteins, but we still need proteins. We don't want to put these pets that have higher requirements for protein into a protein deficit. So we need to look at that individual pet and figure out what is the multimodal approach to fixing the root cause, not just addressing symptoms, so that your pet achieves lifetime optimal health. So that's the key. So those are just a few things looking at that. So high protein, low carb, that can lead to weight loss. A lot of pets that are going on weight loss plans, I'm like, no wonder why your pet's not losing weight. They're on a kibble diet. Yeah, you cut the calorie content by half, but guess what? That microbiome is telling your pet's body, you ain't losing weight anytime soon, because I'm sitting here affecting your immune health and affecting your ability to metabolize the food and your whole metabolic rate. The microbiome is small, but pretty mighty. And the fact that we're now looking at it is really, 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 really important, because we're going to find that we can target the microbiome and get rid of a lot of these diseases. Kidney disease is one of them. Diabetes is another. Constipation in cats. We can use diet. We can use high protein diets, low carb diets to get our pets to lose the weight so they don't have the excess inflammation that leads to things like cancer and chronic illnesses. So if you have a pet that has recurring allergies, if you have a pet that's going through cancer treatment, if you have a dog or a cat that has diarrhea, if you have a cat that's vomiting all the time and you can't get them to stop, if you have a pet chewing their feet nonstop, If you have an anxious pet that's really stressed out, maybe they're getting diarrhea or they're just so stressed out and you're like, oh my gosh, how do I help them? They're scared, they're worried, they're stressed. You're getting stressed. Now you're getting diarrhea. Everyone's getting like IBS-like symptoms. If your pet has dental disease, we can use the microbiome to heal them. We can use food as medicine. We can use food therapy. And then we can add the supplements in to fill in the gaps. You're not stuck with nothing. I know it's frustrating and it's hard, these chronic illnesses, but there is another way. And that's what I want to get across to you guys today, is that you're not stuck. Even if you've been told there's nothing more you can do, we can look at gut health. Yes, sometimes it's a long road, and I have patients that are hard cases, but there's a lot of really cool things coming out. So find those people that you can work with. Keep empowering yourself with education. Learn how to read those pet food labels. Learn how to ensure the supplements you're giving have what they have in them. Make sure you're treating the root cause of disease, or if your pet doesn't have disease, make sure you're optimizing their gut health now with the right foods, the right probiotics, the right supplements, keeping them at the right body weight so that they don't develop disease later on. One of the awesome supplements I talk about a lot lately, because we're doing another giveaway this month's webinar, so where we're going to be talking much more in depth than this. I could keep going all day, but join our webinar because we're going to be doing another giveaway with our gut health product. So this is a supplement that has colostrum. We talked about that being in the first hours of the mother's milk that are helping to establish the good bacteria in your dog and cat's GI tract that's sterile when they're born. This helps heal leaky gut, it reduces inflammation, it supports the immune system, and it also has hemp in it to help with the inflammatory response and optimize the immune system. And blueberries, I love that, organic blueberries that have great antioxidants. So we're using food as medicine, we're using food as the foundation to reduce disease and optimize your pet's health. So make sure you register for the webinar. I know I'm going on and on about it, but it is so essential because we can spend a fortune on disease. I know personally with Finn, our German Shepherd, I talk a lot about him because he was my soul pup and we lost him too early to cancer. And his last few years were all holistic and it was too late. And I don't want that to be your pets. If I could go back and change what I did, knowing what I know now, he would have been started on probiotics from day one, 8 weeks old. Here you go, little buddy. We're adding this in. He wouldn't have been fed the kibble diet. We would have optimized his microbiome. I would have checked his stool to see what bacterial levels, and I probably couldn't do it back then because it hadn't been developed. However, yes, Shauna, a fortune, and we had pet insurance, thank goodness, because we would have spent over $20,000 on this dog. So if you have a pet insurance, we have a blog post actually on pet insurance and analyzing the different companies. And I'm not associated with any pet insurance company, but it saved my butt financially, and I'm a vet. But the thing is we need to look at how to optimize our pet's health from day one, not waiting until they have disease. I can tell you personally, from a human perspective and also from perspective of having 3 pets go through cancer now, if I could change anything, I would do more preventative care. And we don't talk enough about it in the vet world. We look at crisis mode. Oh, now let's look at food. Okay, your pet has IBD. Now we need to look at food. And we wait until something happens. And it's so much harder to climb back up that cliff after we've fallen off, that if we can do things to avoid the cliff and take the path away from the cliff, I highly recommend it. It will save you so much stress, so much money, so much heartache. Olive, would using probiotics in the whole pet colostrum product be too much? Of course, slowly adding each one. Typically it's not. So we have to keep in mind the microbiome. There's trillions of bacteria. And so a lot of times with the colostrum products, I'll reserve it if we have like severe leaky gut or we're not getting a hold on things either, but you can start small. So of course, like you just mentioned, slowly adding each one at a time. When we change things, start with one thing. So I do a lot of herbal medicine. So we'll start with that, or you'll get the supplements first and then you get the herbs second. So you've been on the supplements for a week. And if we're adding 3 or 4 supplements, you add them in, every few days to make sure your pet tolerates it. Because yes, we don't want to add 1,500 different things. That's where we can cause more issues. So that's a great question. So as always, we are at the end of our coffee talk. I hope you found that helpful. Microbiome's not talked about enough in pets, which is why it's been such a big focus for us these past 2 months, and talking about food and using, that's always been a focus. It is the foundation. And just relying on something easy like kibble, yes, it's easy, but it can lead to other issues. Sherry, great question. Can you overdo the probiotics and cause too much microbiome? So we can affect the population species. So if we're giving too much of lactobacillus, we can actually tilt the microbiome in an adverse way. So there needs to be a fine balance. So if you find you start giving a probiotic and they're getting loose stool, they're getting more gassy, they're having, like, they look nauseous, they're licking a lot, they're not doing well, then you want to reduce it. The good thing with these things, and this always goes with herbal medicine and supplements, is you can stop something. So if you're like, I don't know if this is causing it, stop it. Don't add anything else. Do not change anything else. Keep things simple. And after a few days, if you're noticing your pet's going back to normal, you can start it up again small and work your way back up. And if you start seeing those same symptoms again, yeah, it's probably related to that. It is probably causing something. Some pets do well with different probiotics. They're processed differently. They could be milk proteins in there. They could be hypoallergenic. So depending on how that pet does on supplements, whether they're doing well or not, we can always change the type of probiotic. So that's how I work with individual pets. Each pet's different. We can't blanket treat everything. Yes, there's different principles we can follow, but we want to look at our pets as individuals, just like us. I am very different from my husband, very different. Some of the foods he eats, I can't eat, or vice versa. And we are very different. Like, he loses weight very easily. I know my microbiome is probably more messed up than his. I don't know. But anyways, like but it's the same for our pets. I'm just using that as an example. And you can probably relate with your own friends, spouses, partners. We're all very different. And so are our pets. I can look at my Moki versus Kiwi, very different animals. And so I would treat them very differently. They tolerate different foods. So yes, they get fed different foods. We have a buffet in our house because I know one does better on the other. So we have to keep that in mind whenever we're looking at disease, whenever we're looking at prevention too. Some of the foods I recommend may not suit your pet, but if you need help, reach out. We do nutritional plans, or if you need help, we do phone consults. So if you're not getting the advice or attention that you need, reach out. Go to thenaturalpetdoctor.com. You can see all the things we offer. Go to our blog posts, check out our YouTube channel. Make sure you hit subscribe too, because then more people can see it. And I appreciate it so much. The more we can spread the message that there's another way and that pet parents have options, the more good we can create in this world, because our pets are amazing, right? I know you all agree. That's why you're here. I love pets so much. They provide so much love and goodness in our lives. I get goosebumps talking. That's why I do what I do. I just love it. And so the more people we can touch with the information that can help their pets live a longer and happier life, that's the mission. So next week, we're going to be back. It's all diet this month, ending with microbiome, like blowout, but not blowout diarrhea, how to prevent that. And next week, 10 a.m., next Saturday, we're going to be talking about dental disease and diet. Because if you thought kibble helped your pet's teeth, you're in for something exciting. So we're going against the grain in more ways than one. So I hope you all have a fantastic weekend wherever you are in this world. I appreciate you coming and hanging out with me live every Saturday, or whenever you can jump on. You can always catch the replays here. And like I mentioned, make sure you register for our webinar, because I'd love to see you there. You get personalized Q&A with me at the end of that session. And there's also a replay. If you can't make it live, don't worry, you can still watch it. So take care. This is Dr. Katie Woodley with the Natural Pet Doctor. Thank you so much. Have a great weekend.